Hi guys, KP this side. Hope all of you are doing good. Uh, so in the revision of concepts series of SFM, we have done forex, we have done derivatives. Yes, I am left with one class of derivatives which I will be posting in shortly, but today I just felt okay, we'll do equity analysis revision. And we have done a chapter of equity analysis and valuation. If you remember in the class, we first do forex, we then do derivatives, and then we do equity analysis and valuation, then we do mergers, then portfolio management, then mutual funds, then bonds, and then residual topics. This is the sequence in which we do the things for the new syllabus people. And old syllabus obviously is studying capital budgeting, leasing, and dividends as added on chapters. Okay, so equity analysis and valuation. The first important thing is that why valuation of equity is required. The first question is why valuation of equity is required. The answer is very simple, because so equity shares which are trading in the cash market, that is determined by demand and supply, that is the current market price is calculated using the demand and supply forces. That is the market prevailing price, which is not in anybody's control. Today a share is trading, let's say of Infosys, is trading at 710 rupees. Infosys current market price is rupees 710. This 710 is the price available on the exchange BSE NSE, and this price is not determined by anybody. This price is purely based on demand and supply. The latest price at which the buyer and seller have done a transaction, that price will reflect on the screen. So the price that at which the transaction has taken place is 710. Now suppose you come and ask me, sir, I feel like buying Infosys, can you tell me, should I be buying at the current market price or not? Then I will ask you, are you talking about cash market or futures? Futures I already taught you in derivatives, and for futures we use the cost of carry model. I hope you remember that. But for cash market, if you want me to answer whether Infosys should be purchased at its current market price or not, my answer would be, let me first calculate the justified price of Infosys. I will calculate the justified price of Infosys by using some valuation model. That is where equity valuation comes into the picture, and we have different types of models which can be used for doing the for calculating the justified price of the share. Suppose the justified price of the equity share that I calculate is 750 rupees. I feel that Infosys at present should be trading at 750. Then I will compare this with the current market price, which is rupees 710. So obviously in that case I will say that Infosys is underpriced, and obviously I will give a buy recommendation to any of my clients. I'll give a buy recommendation to any of my clients on Infosys because we feel that Infosys is trading at 710, which is the underpriced rate, and it should be actually trading at 750, which we feel is justified. Justified price is also known as theoretical price, fair price, should be price, intrinsic value. We give it different names, but the idea is the same, to do the valuation using some recognized model. This chapter will teach you how that valuation can be done. When we do the valuation, guys, ultimately the objective is to do valuation and figure out if a share is underpriced or overpriced. If it is underpriced, we give a buy recommendation. If it is overpriced, we give a sell recommendation. That is very clear, that is very simple, we know that. Now the question is, for doing the valuation, yes, you use certain models, but then these models are based on two types of analysis. That's why the chapter name is equity analysis and valuation. So first you got to do analysis, and then based on that analysis you do the valuation. So when you do the analysis of equity, you can either use fundamental analysis or technical analysis, isn't it? You can use fundamental analysis or technical analysis. Okay, now how did I tell you to remember this? F is fundamental and F is future. So when we say fundamental, we are basically looking at the future prospects of the company based on its fundamentals. We are looking at the future prospects of the company based on its fundamentals, and there are an innumerable number of fundamental factors which can be considered, like the return on equity of the company. How much return equity shareholders can expect company will generate for it. Then we consider the growth rate. Then we consider the debt equity ratio of the company. We consider the book value per share. We consider the corporate governance of the company, how good the corporate governance is. We'll see how the sales have grown over last 4-5 years. We will see how net profit margins are. We will see how the share is priced relatively when compared to its competitors. We use different price multiples like PE ratio, price to book value, price to cash flow, price to sales. These are all methods of analysis where we are considering the fundamentals of the company, and based on the fundamentals we are trying to predict the future of the company. That's called fundamental analysis. Okay, now I told you that fundamental analysis and technical analysis is the second analysis approach, and they can in exam ask you the theoretical question on this, that what are the differences between fundamental analysis and technical analysis. Now fundamental analysis, when you're trying to predict the future of the company based on its given fundamentals at present, when you're trying to predict the future of the company based on its present fundamentals, then it is basically taking into consideration a long-term horizon. It is mainly useful for people who are long-term investors. For them, you can give a target, like you can say, looking at Infosys fundamentals today, I feel Infosys should be touching the mark of 750 rupees, which means today at 710, Infosys becomes an underpriced share for me, and I gave a buy recommendation on Infosys. You get my point, what I'm saying? We are looking at the fundamentals of the company. We are trying to understand the future of the company based on its present scenario. What is technical analysis? Technical analysis is considered useful for traders or for short-term investors, if I can say that, or mainly for speculators. And the technical analysis will mainly use some price patterns in the past. Some charts will be used of the past, like support, resistance. I gave you examples in the class. A share will have a support and resistance. Resistance means share is not going above that range. Support means share is not going below that range. We use the line charts, bars and graphs to analyze how the traders or investors are behaving at a given price pattern. Technical analysis will be short-term vision, but fundamental analysis has long-term vision. Now, keeping in mind how things have been in last 10 to 12 years, there are a couple of sums. One is that degree of freedom sum, if you remember, and one is that moving average sum. One is given in our main book, one is given in our supplementary book. These are the only two sums, guys, which you need to see for technical analysis, and some theory you have to refer in case of technical analysis, right? I'm repeating myself. Technical analysis is seldom tested in exam in last 10 to 12 years. Probably 1 or 2 questions would have come so far in last 25 papers. You need to see that moving average sum and the degree of freedom sum. These are the two sums which you need to see. Both are covered in our material. Solved illustrations are given. Apart from that, some Dow Jones theory or support resistance theory. These are some of the things. Efficient market hypothesis. All these things are given in my book. For theory purposes, they might ask you on technical analysis, which means 23, 24 out of 25 times you will be tested on fundamental analysis, and primarily they ask you practical questions on fundamental analysis. So my revision will be primarily focusing on fundamental analysis of equity. Now you understand why we do analysis, because analysis will help you do valuation, and based on valuation you decide if a share is underpriced or overpriced. If it is underpriced, we give a buy recommendation. If it is overpriced, we give a sell recommendation. Guys, I hope you're making sense. Okay, so I'm starting with fundamental analysis, and in fundamental analysis, guys, if you remember, we have divided our discussion into 3 types. The first is called as discounted cash flow technique. If you remember, guys, fundamental analysis, we have done discounted cash flow technique. In discounted cash flow technique, again, we have done dividend discount model, and we have done free cash flow approach. Next, we have done relative valuation. In relative valuation, we use multiples. Primarily, we use the multiple, which is PE ratio, to compare which stock is underpriced, which stock is overpriced. I'll talk a little bit about it. And we use other price multiples like price to book value, price to sales, price to cash flow. These are used. And then based on the relative analysis, like we see whether the stock at its current price is looking underpriced when compared to other stocks from the industry. I gave you so many examples. In fact, if you remember, we did the FMCG sector analysis in the class, and I showed you why ITC looks cheap when compared to competitors like HUL, Dabur, Britannia. If you remember that analysis, we did a comprehensive analysis in the class, and in fact the analysis was also done by students in the class during the presentations, if you remember that. And lastly, we did the residual valuation, guys. And residual valuation, I hope you remember, was the most easy and scoring part, where we have used only 2 measures, which are EVA and MVA, economic value added and market value added. These are the total discussions which we have done in the fundamental analysis. Okay, so we start with the dividend discount model. Now When I say discounted cash flow technique, you remember this, I told you in discounted cash flow technique, it is very simple. We take the future cash flows expected from the equity and we discount it at investors RE. What is RE, sir? RE is required rate of return. Investors RE is used to discount the future cash flows from the share. Equity share, what are the cash flows, sir? Cash flows can be dividends, cash flow can be the selling price which we will get at the end of the holding period. Dividends and selling price which we get at the end of the holding period. Dividends you will get every year, selling price you will get at the end of the holding period. Now, when I am talking about dividend discount model, and if you remember, I told you dividend discount model can again be of two types. There are two types of sums which can come in dividend discount model. Type 1 sums is where we are given the investment horizon of the investor is given, and type 2 sums are where investment horizon is not given. Most of the times investment horizon is not given. That is where you use the Gordon model for doing the valuation of shares. The type 1 sums are where investment horizon is given. If investment horizon of the investor is given, then intrinsic value is calculated as D1 by 1 plus RE plus D2 by 1 plus RE square plus D3 plus P3, assuming that you are going to hold the share for 3 years. Assuming that you are going to hold the share for 3 years, then this is the price. You will get D1 divided by 1 plus RE plus D2 divided by 1 plus RE square plus D3 plus P3. That is price at the end of 3rd year, assuming you are going to sell the share at the end of 3rd year, divided by 1 plus RE to the power cube. Every year discounting will be done. The further the cash flows are, more discounting has to be done, because RE is given on per annum basis. So 3rd year cash flow will be discounted 3 times. Clear? Now DDM type 1 sums is where investment horizon is given. Why this model is called as dividend discount model? Because this model will primarily consider in cash flows from the share the dividends, and obviously if investment horizon is given, then the price which we predict at the end of the investment horizon, that will also be taken. I hope guys this is clear to us. Okay, now the question is, in this method we are using RE as a discount rate. Now let me just talk a little bit about RE. If you remember, we have done this discussion that RE is calculated as per CAPM model if it is directly not given. If it is given, good for us. If it is not given, then you use this model for calculating RE, which is RF plus RM minus RF into beta. RE is equal to RF plus RM minus RF into beta. RE is basically used for discounting of cash flows. Before I even started with the class of equity, if you remember, we did a comparison of RE, ER and ROE. I hope you remember this, guys. I told you 3 things are there. RE is the required rate of return, ER is expected return from the company's stock, and ROE is the return on equity which company is able to generate actually. Now, if you remember, I told you this, RE is the required rate of return of the investor. When investor comes to the market for investing, the first thing investor will do is he will define his required rate of return. He will first of all define his required rate of return. That is the return he wants from the company. Expected return, ER, is the return which company is expected to generate for the investor. So basically, first thing what we do is, guys, we make comparison of these two. And only when RE is greater than ER, we say the share is underpriced and we give a buy recommendation. Suppose my required rate of return is, made a mistake, apologies. When RE is less than ER, only then we say that the share is underpriced and we give a buy recommendation. Suppose my requirement is 20% and the stock is expected to generate 22%. Then obviously, because stock is giving you a return more than your requirement, So for us, the stock becomes underpriced and we give a buy recommendation. So the first thing you do is you define your required rate of return. This required rate of return is calculated as per CAPM. RE is RF plus RM minus RF into beta. This RE is compared with expected return from the stock. Expected return from the stock is basically given. If it is not given, then we can calculate it as summation Px, that is probabilities multiplied with the expected value, or it can also be calculated as P1 minus P0 plus D1 divided by P0 into 100, which is basically the holding period formula, guys, if you remember that. So ER is summation Px. We can do that. If the probability of expected returns are given, you do summation Px. I've taught this in 4x. Don't look at me like that. Then we have discussed that it can also be calculated as a holding period return, which is P1 minus P0 plus D1 divided by P0 into 100. It can also be calculated as expected return, can also be calculated as dividend yield plus growth rate. dividend yield plus growth rate. These are some of the formulas which can be used for calculating expected return, and sometimes you are lucky, then in that case this will be directly provided to you. Okay, so this is expected return, guys. We have understood that. After you have decided whether you want to buy the share or not, then what we do is we compare RE and ROE, where ROE is return on equity. This is the danger zone, guys. This is where some students have a tendency to get confused and they start interchanging the two terms. They feel RE and ROE are same. Actually, RE and ROE are not same. RE is your requirement. ROE is what company is able to generate for its equity shareholders. RE is your required rate of return. Look at the word required. Required means you want that. ROE is return on equity, what company has actually generated. ROE is calculated by using the formula PAT divided by net worth into 100. I hope you remember that. Or we also say that it is EPS divided by book value per share into 100. Any of the two formulas can be used. The second one is basically per share basis formula, and the first one is totality formula. PAT divided by net worth into 100, or EPS divided by book value per share into 100. What is book value per share? Book value is net worth divided by number of shares. This is one very important formula, and you find a lot of application even in mergers chapter. EPS divided by book value per share. What is book value per share? Book value per share is net worth divided by number of shares. Net worth divided by number of shares. So basically, guys, we learned three things. There is RE. RE is the required rate of return of the investor. This required rate of return of the investor is either provided or you calculate it as per CAPM, where RE is equal to RF plus RM minus RF into beta. Second is expected return. Expected return will be given, or if it is not given, then you can calculate it as summation PX, or the holding period return, which is P1 minus P0 plus D1 divided by P0 into 100, or you can calculate it as dividend yield plus growth rate. Expected return and RE is compared. Only when expected return is more than RE, then the stock is underpriced for you and you give a buy recommendation on it. After that, what you do is you compare RE and ROE. ROE is basically the actual return which company is able to generate for its equity shareholders, and in that case we use the formula PAT by net worth or EPS by book value per share. That is the second formula which we use. टू 301 लगाया हुआ था. टू 316. Okay, this ROE is compared with RE to decide if overall there is a wealth creation or wealth destruction. So RE and ROE comparison is done, and we decide whether there is a wealth creation or wealth destruction. Once you have purchased the share of the company, you need to know whether you benefited by purchasing the share of the company or not. In that case, what you do is you make comparison of RE and ROE. RE is supposed 20%, ROE is 22%. Obviously, you will be very happy because for you there is a wealth creation. I would have been happy if I got 20%, but I am getting paid 22% by the company, which is actually very good, and I will be more than happy in that case. Just like you expect to get 70 in SFM, but you end up scoring 80 in SFM. You have a smile on your face, right? You have it, I can see that. Yes. So now you understood this, right? So three things we compare: RE, ER, ROE. The same sequence in which I speak, you need to remember: RE first, then ER, then ROE. This is how we got to remember, guys. Okay, now we use this RE, which is investors required rate of return, for discounting of cash flows, and we remember that the discounting of cash flows is done under two models. I'm repeating it. First is the DDM, dividend discount model. Second is the free cash flow approach. DDM method will again have two types of sums. Number one sum is where investment horizon is given. Number two is where investment horizon is not given. If investment horizon is given, we make use of this equation for calculating the intrinsic value of the share, which is D1 divided by 1 plus RE plus D2 divided by 1 plus RE square plus D3 plus P3 divided by 1 plus RE cube. And this is 3 years data, assuming that investor will hold the share for 3 years. If he's going to hold it for more than 3 years, then you will take 4, 5, 6 years, whatever they give. Generally, they will give you 3 to 4 years data itself. Next, the second type of sums which can come on dividend discount model is where investment horizon is not given. Guys, if investment horizon is not given, then we can't take the price because we don't know when you're going to sell the share. So price is not taken, only dividends are taken. When investment horizon is not given, we will have to forecast the growth in dividends. And we can have three types in this case. One is no growth DDM. DDM can be of three types. One is constant growth DDM, and one is multiple growth DDM. we will have to forecast what growth in dividends is expected, and based on that we will calculate the share price, that is the justified price of the share. Remember, this method is only used when we do not have the investment horizon. If investment horizon is given, we follow the above equation. If it is not given, only then these three methods are used. Here P0 is equal to EPS by RE. When company does not have any growth, then its earnings and dividends are same, and we simply calculate the price using the formula EPS by RE. In class I have discussed that this formula is based on A by I, that is we have perpetual cash flows, same cash flows every year, we have perpetual cash flows, and based on that we calculated. Next is constant growth model, where P0 is equal to, this is the one which is most tested in exam, P0 is equal to D1 divided by RE minus G. This is the formula we use for calculating. This is used when you expect dividends will grow at the same rate per annum forever. This is the formula you use when dividends are expected to grow at same rate per annum forever. The first formula is used when dividends are not expected to grow. The second formula is used when dividends are expected to grow at same rate per annum forever. P0 is equal to D1 by RE minus G. Now there are two things to answer. Number one, what is D1? D1 is equal to D0 into 1 plus G. That is, D0 is the current paid dividend paid for last financial year, and D1 is the expected dividend, that is dividend that you are anticipating for next period. So you take D0, that is current dividend, and you add growth in it. So you get D1. D1 is D0 into 1 plus G. I hope guys this is clear. What is G? G is the sustainable growth rate, and it is calculated using the formula B into R. We have only learned one formula for calculating growth, and that is G is equal to B into R, where B is the retention ratio. How do we calculate retention ratio? It is 100 minus payout ratio. It is 100 minus payout ratio. Like suppose if EPS is 10 rupees, dividend is 4 rupees, then dividend payout ratio is 4 divided by 10. How much company is paying out to the shareholders? Then dividend payout ratio is 40%. Then what is the retention ratio, guys? Then retention ratio is 100 minus 40%, because out of my total earnings, how much we are paying? Out of my total earnings, how much we are paying? Out of my total earnings, we are paying 40%, and 60% we are retaining. I hope guys this is clear to you. Okay, next is R. I have told you R is ROE. So you calculate sustainable growth rate using the formula B into R, and this growth rate is then used in this formula for calculating the share price. Constant growth model is a model where we will see that the growth in dividends is same for all the future years. Last method is multiple growth DDM. Multiple growth DDM will have 2 or 3 periods generally. We have something called as explicit forecast period, and then we have horizon period. I hope you remember all this, guys. Explicit forecast period and horizon period. In the explicit forecast period, if you remember, we make a table where we calculate the dividend for each year, and then we discount it at RE. This is the period when dividends are expected to grow at a very high rate of 30-40%. And then horizon period is the period when the growth rate will come down to the industry average. Suppose the growth rate will come down to the industry average from the 6th year, then what we do is we calculate price at the end of 5th year, and price is calculated using the formula P5 is equal to D6 divided by RE minus G. From 6th year, if my growth rate has come down to the industry average, then we calculate the price at the end of 5th year. Therefore P5 is equal to D6 divided by RE minus G, and then what we do is we calculate the present value of P5 and we bring it to its present value. Once you calculate it to its present value, then you will have the answer of justified price. In justified price, the answer is stage 1 plus stage 2. What is stage 1? Stage 1 is explicit forecast period. Explicit forecast period is where your dividends are going to grow at a higher rate, so you find the present value of all such dividends. And stage 2 is where you use these two things. P5 is D6 by RE minus G, and then we do the present value of P5, that is P5 is discounted 5 times with the RE. That will give you the stage 2 present value. You add stage 1 and stage 2 and you get the discount intrinsic value of the share today. I hope this is clear, guys. So 3 different cases that can come in case of investment horizon not being given for dividend discount model is no growth DDM, constant growth DDM, and multiple growth DDM. No growth DDM is P0 is equal to EPS by RE. Constant growth DDM is P0 is equal to D1 divided by RE minus G. And multiple growth DDM is explicit forecast period and horizon period sum total. Sometimes in case of multiple growth DDM, you will find that they will also provide you with the transition period, During transition period, growth rate will slowly come down every year, and in such cases what we do is stage 1 will become a sum total of explicit forecast period and transition period. And transition period, we calculate how much the change, how much dividend is falling each year, divided by the number of years during which that fall happens, and then you add the explicit forecast period and transition period. You do one calculation of stage 1, and stage 2 is horizon period, and that will be done the same way like I have told you. Theoretically, I told you one thing in the class: the dividend discount model is useful when we are doing the valuation from retail perspective. That is, company share is being purchased by people like you and me. We want a small shareholding in the company, and in that case we will be more interested in what dividends company is going to pay. Apart from that, if the valuation is done from the viewpoint of the control, like you want to buy a good stake in the company, maybe you want some controlling interest or influential rights in the company, you will not be interested in dividends that company is paying. You will be more interested in the overall free cash flows that company is able to generate. You are more interested in the free cash flows that company is able to generate. Okay, and as far as free cash flows is concerned, guys, these free cash flows can again be of two types. We can have free cash flow for the firm, and we can have free cash flow for the equity. We can have free cash flow for the firm, and we can have free cash flow for equity. There are two methods for calculating the justified price of the equity using free cash flow approach. Now listen carefully. We use free cash flow approach when doing the valuation from control perspective. Free cash flow approach can also be used when the dividends of the company are not stable. Then also you can use this method for doing valuation. So in the discounted cash flow technique that we are studying, there are two methods. One is DDM. DDM we have already discussed. The second is free cash flow approach. Free cash flow approach can help you calculate the value of the share using two methods. One is free cash flow for the firm approach. One is free cash flow for the equity. Now this method says that we are not interested in the overall profits that company is generating. We are not interested in the overall profits that company is generating. We want to know, out of that profit which company is generating, how much are they going to pay for investment in capex. Capex is investment in capital assets like plant, furniture, fixtures, land, building, all these things, and how much they are going to put in working capital. Any money which is left after making investments in capex and working capital, that will be considered as free cash flows. Maybe you have huge profits, but we are not interested in your profits, because out of profits we want to know what is committed and what is not committed. Whatever is not committed towards capex and working capital, only that cash flows will be considered for doing valuation of the company. So free cash flow for the firm approach, we consider the profit as NOPAT. If you remember, guys, the NOPAT is EBIT into 1 minus T. We take the post-tax EBIT, that is EBIT into 1 minus T. We take the profit figures as NOPAT. Once we calculate NOPAT, we will then consider the investments that we are going to do, investments in capex and working capital. From my NOPAT, that is my net operating profit after tax, we consider the investments in capex and working capital, and then from this, once we subtract it, we get the free cash flow for the firm. We get free cash flow for the firm because this is approach 1, FCFF. Free cash flow for the firm, we discount this free cash flow for the firm at KC, and once we do that, we get the value of the firm. But I'm not interested in value of the firm, I am interested in value of the equity, and then value of the equity is equal to value of the firm minus market value of debt. That will give you value of the equity, and then using this value of equity, we calculate the intrinsic value per share, which is value of equity divided by number of shares. Value of equity divided by number of shares, that will give you IVPS. Let's repeat it, guys. What is the profit figure we are looking at when we are doing the FCFF approach? We are looking at NOPAT figures, net operating profit after tax, which is EBIT into 1 minus T. Why we don't reduce interest? Because interest is the earnings available for the debt providers, and firm approach talks about both the debt and equity providers, and for free cash flow for equity approach considers only the equity shareholders. So free cash flow for the firm is debt plus equity approach. Free cash flow for equity is straight away the equity approach. Ultimately the objective is still the same, guys, that we have to calculate the share price and compare it with the market price. In case of free cash flow for the firm approach, you use NOPAT as your relevant profit figure. Then you consider the capex and working capital investments, the total investments you consider here. You reduce that from the NOPAT, you get the free cash flows. This free cash flows will be discounted at KC, and then you get value of the firm. This value of the firm will be reduced by the market value of debt. Then you get value of equity. Once you get value of equity, you find out the intrinsic value per share, which is value of equity divided by number of shares. In case of free cash flow for equity approach, the relevant profit figure is PAT. The relevant profit figure is PAT. You consider only the equity investments as a subtraction from this, equity investments in capex and changes in working capital. Mind it, we consider changes in working capital, not the total working capital. Working capital was there in my business last year also. This year, how much additional working capital commitment we have, that we need to consider. So equity investment is considered only in capex and changes in working capital. From PAT, once you remove this, you straight away get FCFE. FCFE will be discounted at KE, not KC, because we are talking about equity shareholders, so discounting will be done at KE, and then we get the value of equity. And again, this value of equity is divided by number of shares. We get IVPS, intrinsic value per share, which will then be compared with the justified, which will then be compared with the market price to find out if the share is overpriced or underpriced. Guys, I hope this part is clear to you. Now, listen very carefully. There are three things I want to say apart from this. Number one, which one is the direct approach? Obviously, free cash flow for equity approach is more direct approach because it straight away gives us the intrinsic value of the share. But then I told you in exam, they can also use the first approach, which is free cash flow for the firm approach. And in that case, the only disadvantage is that at the end of it, you will get value of the firm. And from value of firm, we will have to calculate value of equity by removing the market value of debt. Point number two, when you do the discounting of free cash flow for the firm at KC and free cash flow of equity at KE, again, you can have three different models. One is no growth, one is constant growth, and one is multiple growth. Be very careful about it. This is exactly same as DDM, guys. Formulas are same: A by I, C1 by I minus G, and explicit forecast period and horizon period. The same ways, you need to see what kind of growth they have given, and based on that you will have to consider whichever method is to be used. I hope this is clear, guys. Okay, so you can have no growth, constant growth, and multiple growth. Next, last thing I need to say is that how do we calculate KC? If you remember, KC is WD plus WD into KD plus WE into KE. If KC is directly given, good for us. If it is not given, then we use this for calculating it. Okay, next is the relative valuation. In case of relative valuation, I told you we use the multiples like PE ratio or price to book value ratio for deciding price to book value ratio for calculating the share price. So using these multiples, how share price is calculated, like PE multiple approach, what we do is we take the industry average PE ratio, and we take the industry average PE ratio and we multiply it with EPS of the company to find out the justified share price of the company. Similarly, you can take the average from the industry book price to book value ratio and multiply with the book value per share of the company. This is generally taken of the company, this is generally taken of the industry, and you then also find out the share price. You can find the share price using any of these methods. And in relative valuation, ITC sum we have done. If you remember, guys, the overall value of ITC cigarettes for FMCG and paper division, the valuation was done. That is one kind of sums which can come. And one more sum which can come, if you remember that all three companies have same capital, same earnings. That sum which we have done, which was a blend of relative valuation and residual valuation. That is the another kind of sum which they can test in exam. So PE ratio into EPS is share price, and price to book value ratio into book value per share is also the share price. Relative valuation can be used when you're trying to compare between companies belonging to the same industry and they have more or less the same kind of risk. They are dealing in same products, only then comparison can be done. You can't compare SBI and ITC. You can compare SBI and PNB, and you can compare ITC with Dabur or Britannia or Colgate, but you can't compare between SBI and ITC, or you can't compare between Infosys and Dr. Reddy. You need to compare companies belonging to the same industry. They're more or less their risk and fundamentals should be same, only then that comparison can be done. Most important thing in this part is this particular formula. Whenever they give you PE ratio of the company, chances are very high they want you to use the PE multiple approach for calculating the share price. You will see application in this chapter. You will also see application in the mergers and acquisitions chapter. The last method is the residual valuation. In case of residual valuation, I told you what they do is they ask you to calculate the economic value added by the company. Now, I told you economic value added by the company is the residual value that company is able to generate. Residual value means extra earnings that company is generating, over and above its cost. Whatever extra earnings company has over and above its committed cost, that is called economic value added. If you remember, we did three formulas for it. EVA is ROE minus RE into net worth. This is one formula. I told you net worth is share capital plus reserves and surplus. ROE is return that company is able to generate for its equity shareholders minus RE, that is the required rate of return of the investor. The second formula which can be used is PAT minus KE into net worth. This is the second formula. On the net worth, cost of equity is multiplied, that is the money shareholders want. PAT is what they actually get. And last is NOPAT minus KC into capital employed. NOPAT minus KC into capital employed. This is the firm approach. Capital employed is important, which is net worth plus long-term debt. Net worth plus long-term debt. So that is capital employed, and we do it into KC, and then we reduce it from NOPAT. NOPAT, I've already told you, is EBIT into 1 minus T. Okay, so I think more or less we've covered all the important concepts, and we did it in 35 minutes. I know I was fast, and I have to be fast because you are using this video for revision purpose. It should make sense by doing it in less amount of time so that you can do multiple revisions, guys, and do practice a lot of sums at this point of time. But then the chapters where you feel you are forgetting the concepts or you're not able to remember them, or you need to do some quick revisions, then these videos will be very useful for you for updating your conceptual discussions. And apart from that, only those sums which I've told you are important. If you remember, I told you in the class some sums as important, very important. Those sums you should try to practice as many times as possible. Okay, so apart from this, yes, I told you we have one more video left on derivatives that I will make. I'll try to make a video on portfolio management as well. Portfolio management, I don't know if I can add a lot of value by making a video because it is not more conceptual, it is more formula oriented chapter, but still a lot of requests are coming in, so I'll try and make that video as well. Okay, I hope you enjoyed the video, guys. If you liked it, please leave a thumbs up and please write something in the comment section. Don't leave it empty. Till we meet again, bye bye. God bless all of you. Thank you, guys.